and welcome to the Idea People podcast. I'm Stephanie Graves, the CEO of Leander's Group. Leander's Group is a full-service PR agency focusing on strategic communications, marketing, and outreach. I'm thrilled to have you join us for today's conversation. Now, let me hand it over to our fantastic host, Rick Garcia.
Well, welcome to the Idea People. I'm your host, Rick Garcia, and today we are joined by Leander's Group President and CEO, Stephanie Graves. Hi, Stephanie.
Hello, Rick.
This must be a special occasion for you to be in here keeping an eye on me.
Well, I want to keep an eye on you, but also I'm so excited about the guest.
Oh, our guest today, Kameale Terry. She's the co-founder and CEO of ChargerHelp, and ChargerHelp is a cutting-edge technology company that was launched in 2020. It tackles the issue of inoperable electric vehicle charging stations. Kameale's a native of South Central Los Angeles. Her background in operations and technology, combined with her commitment to empowering historically marginalized communities, has positioned her as a thought leader in the clean energy and mobility sectors. Welcome to the Idea People.
Hello.
We're so happy to have you. If you could share your experiences and your upbringing and how that shaped the passion that you have for technology, data, and community empowerment.
No, absolutely. So I am first generation American. Both my parents are from Belize. And my mom actually was a special education teacher working for LAUSD. And my dad was an early entrepreneur, started his first company when he was like 23, focused on building out a lot of the computer server rooms, computer bases for a lot of the Black doctors here in Los Angeles back in the 70s. And so I think with those two kind of like foundations of being a first generation American, seeing entrepreneurship, seeing folks try to like move through the rankings of South Central really identified for me that one, folks given opportunity can actually do very well for themselves. And that two, literally anything is possible.
And so the issue of EV charging, when did that come to mind as something that you wanted to be a part of and that helped launch ChargerHelp?
Absolutely. So back in probably 2015, 2016 or so, I was working for a company. We were making software for EV charging stations. And I honestly stumbled into that company, was never a type of person that knew a ton about the environment or electric vehicles, which is very interesting. And at that time period, I just needed a job. And so I was working there at something called EV driver support and learned a ton about just not only electric vehicles, but also the air quality. And this really rang home for me during COVID, where, I was still living in South Central by the Slauson Swap Meet. And technically from that space, you should see the Hollywood sign. And I did not realize that it wasn't until COVID, when people were not driving their cars, that I actually saw the Hollywood sign. And ever since people have been driving the cars, you see the smog level. And so, I kind of jumped a whole sprint there, but it was validation to me that while electric vehicles are not the silver bullet, right? Like there's a lot of other things that we need to do. It was very clear to me that the way that we were moving, the vehicles that we were moving in, it was bringing harm to us. Like it is having an impact, and I think COVID really showed that to me in a very realistic way. But anyways, with charging stations themselves, we have a huge opportunity to make the driver experience better, right? Like people today are buying electric vehicles, not necessarily because they care about the environment. Most people are choosing to buy electric vehicles because the cars are cool. And, today there is a gap in the experience of EV charging stations. And at ChargerHelp, we are working to fill that gap, which I'm happy to get more into.
Let me just say, Rick, don't you have an electric vehicle?
I do, and I was one of the early buyers of an electric vehicle, 2013, when the first Tesla came out, the S. And for me, the reason, and I thank you for the question, Stephanie, I never get interviewed on this show, is that for me, it was the whole idea. I mean, I loved the idea of, part of it was environment. I love the idea that I didn't have to go to a gas station anymore. And on top of that, the icing on the cake was it was better for our community. And so the timing was right for me, and I loved my car.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, which I'm sure we'll get into, like the Tesla experience is something that's very unique, specifically in the United States. It is actually the only EV charging station that the software for the battery management system, for the connector, for the charging station itself is all made at the same company. What folks may not know is that the rest of the industry, specifically in the US, there is no other ecosystem like that of software. And that's really where we play a part. But I'll save that.
Well, no, you
question.
and we can continue on that because I have had my own frustrations. Most of the time, the charging stations are reliable, but one of our more common trips is the drive to Las Vegas from Los Angeles. It's a long commute, and the stop is in Barstow when you want to charge. And every charging station was out in one location, and I was like, "Oh, you got to be kidding me!" Because now you can be stranded. So that's where you kind of come in with this, and so. Early development of this company, and it is still kind of early, right? This is a new company, relatively speaking. How hard was that getting it off the ground, though?
To be quite honest, I mean, it didn't feel hard, and I guess like I'm from South Central Los Angeles. I'm from a certain community. I've done very hard things. I think starting a company actually was very exciting and probably like the least hard thing. But I guess the parts that I had to really wrap my mind around was that. One, in 2020, we didn't see a huge influx of electric vehicles. I feel like a lot of the electric vehicle commitments actually came like post-COVID, right? The other thing in 2020, we weren't really talking about the EV charging infrastructure in a meaningful way that you really hear about it today. And so what I had to do a lot of was to figure out, one, is the timing right? Because that's the biggest thing with starting a business. And then two, how could we help to bring forth the industry? And what does that mean? For us, that meant we actually created the nation's first ever ONET code with the Department of Labor. Essentially, it is a code that identifies a job class. So an EVSE technician was created by my co-founder who worked with the DOL to establish it in 2021. We worked with the Society of Automotive Engineers to create the first ever certification to actually test people to be certified as a technician. And then we also created policy. There's EV Charging Reliability Act was passed last year. My head of government relations, who's also a South LA native, wrote that bill and got that bill passed. And so we had to one, convince people to give me money. Two,
and I want to hear about that.
Yeah.
Raising money. That's very interesting to me. How do you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is being able to solve a real problem. I think that we were seeing that upwards of 30 to 40% of the current deployed infrastructure being inoperable, which is crazy because most of the infrastructure was funded through government funding, ratepayer funding, taxpayer funding. And so a third of it literally not working. And at worst case, sending someone to a station that did not work and they thought that it was going to work, right? And so we had a real problem. I think the other piece to it was a real solution. We believe that big data can solve this problem. We believe that you can build good software with more information and more access to data. So I think having a real problem and then having our approach to our solution and being able to tell a sound story was helpful. As of today, we've raised over $21 million. I just closed out a corporate round, which was another 10 that hopefully we'll announce in a meaningful way very soon. But it really was those components, having a real problem, having a real solution, and then being able to really sell a story.
And I'm sorry, Rick, but just one more thing. When selling a story, so since we are a PR firm, how were you selling your story?
It was through customers. I mean, the greatest thing is that before I took on a check, I had a contract with EV Connect, which was the company I worked at in the Southern California Edison. And we were able to showcase that not only the work we were doing around workforce development was important, but also our approach to reliability was important. And I think investors saw, okay, problem, solution, this story aligns with real customers. For us to be such a small company, we were one of the first companies that got a press release that we worked with Tesla, right? They weren't working with everyone. And so I think that was a part of it. It was really allowing our customers to be at the forefront and validating why what we had built was important and why the timing was correct right now.
I just want to let our listeners know they're listening to Kameale Terry. She's the co-founder and CEO of ChargerHelp, joining us on the idea people. Before we get into workforce development, because we do want to talk about that, I just had one more follow-up on the raising money part. Is the pitch, do you still go in and pitch face-to-face when you're trying to raise money, or is that done virtually now? Is that done just via digitally, or how does that work?
Yeah, so our first fundraise was actually during COVID. It was actually right after George Floyd was murdered. And so it was a very interesting time frame to fundraise because while there was a lot of capital going to like Black and brown founders, we had to really be diligent about who we took capital from. So the first time we went out to fundraise, we actually oversubscribed and had to turn people away. And it would really, for me, it was that at the end of the day, we want to compete, period, right? And we need investors that understand our business and aren't solely investing in us just because we're Black or just because we're women. It is that, oh no, we have a great idea, we have a great business, and it just so happens to be that we are Black women from Compton and South Central. So, fundraising in the early time period was all through Zoom, and a lot of it had to be me being able to really, make a good decision on who I allowed into my cap table, right? Because I knew we were going to be successful. And so that wasn't a matter of that. It was more so like who could be a part of that success and help us, 3x that success, 4x that success. This last round that I closed, interestingly enough, most of the folks that came into the round, I've built relationships with over the years. We actually have a very prominent company that came into this round that I built a relationship in person 2 years ago, and it's been an ongoing kind of relationship building. So now it's more in person, but in the beginning, a lot of it was through Zoom. People, the one thing I will say, my mom, she ended up passing, but she just thought it was so wild that people would wire me like hundreds of thousands of dollars and we never met in person. And she kept being like, are you going to have to give this money back? I'm like, no, I don't have to give it back technically, but I got to make more money. But she just thought it was the craziest thing. Our first round, we did about $2.75 million. And this is my mom is an immigrant. I'm from South Central Los Angeles. It was just none of this made sense to her.
She was probably like, you're going to get a letter one day. Right. You have to write this check back.
So confused.
If we were pitching this as a movie, you would pitch it as software meets workforce development. Describe that part.
I don't know if I would pitch it like that.
Really?
Yeah. I think the interesting thing is that folks have really pushed us into this workforce development box, which has been the most interesting thing because we've never positioned ourselves as that. When my co-founder is from Compton, like I said, and I'm from South Central, and both of our parents have always worked jobs that they've never really increased their pay, even though they were union-based jobs, even though they were state jobs or city jobs, whatever. They've always were in this space that they weren't ever able to really build wealth. And so when we thought about creating ChargerHelp, while there was a component that involved, field service labor, what we wanted to do was to create a good business. And a good business to us meant that you paid people a certain wage. It meant that you looked at adjacent, industries to bring folks in because you believe that they could come in with a more curious mindset to actually be more successful and drive the business. All of our folks that work at our company, down to our technicians, all have equity in the company. Our minimum pay, I believe, is about $31 an hour, and we guarantee 40 hours of work. But it's not because we're workforce development. We just believe that in order to build a successful company, you have to be right by people. So I think that would be the story, is that a lot of tech companies get a bad rap because they're always looking for a way to cut cost on labor and cut cost on people. We don't think that cost dissipates. It either gets put onto the taxpayer or onto the federal government. One of the greatest jokes is that I think there's, a Walmart, right? A lot of the folks that get paid below a certain amount end up having to be on, different government assistance. So is Walmart being helped by the government? You know what I mean? So for us, we're just no, let's think about this full cost of this human and how can we get the most out of this human and make sure that they feel valued and cared for. And that is just a good business. But I think because of that, people are well, you guys do workforce development. We're no, we're a tech company. We just think this is the way you do tech.
a tech company, though, that really has employees first of mind.
Yeah. To me, because I just think that when you don't do it that way, you see the costs later on at those companies. You've seen those companies get sued. You've seen those companies take a brand impact. Like, it's interesting how we measure success today of like a lot of tech companies, and we don't take into account, like I said, how tech companies have cut numbers on their end, and then that cost goes on to society. And so, yeah, I guess maybe because my co-founder and I have had parents that's had, they weren't even part of tech companies, and we've had to deal with like the repercussions of that. Like my mom working, as a special education assistant, but still having to be on Section 8. Like, that's weird to me. We were on Section 8 our whole lives, even though she had a job that was union-based. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a lot that we've been unpacking to us. It's just how you do good business.
Kameale Terry is our guest on The Idea People. She's the co-founder and CEO of ChargerHelp. You've mentioned your co-founder partner a couple of times. You want to mention her name in case she's listening?
Yes, Yvette Ellis. And she's actually she just became the commissioner of sustainability for Long Beach, the city of Long Beach. She's very fancy, yes.
Oh, awesome. We love the city of Long Beach.
Yes. She got a Harvard degree and then went on and got bougie on us.
To do a reset of this conversation, tell us what ChargerHelp does from start to finish again.
Sure. So at ChargerHelp, we are ensuring reliability of EV charging stations. So we're working with cities, utilities, fleet operators. So if they're deploying an EV charging station, we are essentially guaranteeing a level of performance, no matter where they acquire that charging station from.
And in what ways do you engage with local communities? You've mentioned South Central a number of times. And how do you leverage PR to shine a spotlight on some of those local efforts? Sure.
So for us, how we acquire talent is really community based. We are across 17 states. We wholeheartedly believe that, local community, and specifically communities that have had to be more creative in order to figure things out, typically do better at a problem-solving job. So we work very closely with the LA Clean Tech Incubator here in Los Angeles. We actually have a facility off of Crenshaw and Exposition that we do training out of. We work with the California Mobility Center in Sacramento, work with Ford Michigan Central out of Detroit. We work with Southern Company out of Atlanta. So we are just we believe in partnering with workforce development centers, nonprofits that are tapped into the community to help us find great talent. And in PR, for us, we're just all of how do we tell our story? We keep striking out with PR agencies, so.
Well, you do have a really good, your LinkedIn is really good.
That's all me.
Yeah, okay. See, well, you're so incredibly smart. I'm just so blown away because besides having, like we were saying, world experience that brings you up to be the person you are, and so you look out for your communities and your employees. I think that's so important. But just how I wouldn't even have thought of this type of business, 7 years ago? When did this come into play where this was actually some sort of business?
Yeah, interestingly enough, our evolution has been very, I would say, calculated, right? When we first started in January 1st of 2020, there was no way that I would be I'm selling performance management for EV charging stations. People would be like, okay, girl. Some people, we got a contract. Some people, but what we actually started off selling was training. Because what we knew was that this, space was going to come into place. And maybe that's why people believe us as workforce development, but we were selling training. So we had to create a curriculum to train our technicians. And we're just we should create an ecosystem of folks to get trained. And not just on EV charging, it was on fixing charging stations. It was actually understanding the ecosystem. A lot of folks don't know that in this ecosystem, there are so many parts. There are project managers, there are project coordinators, there are design build. Because it's infrastructure and technology, there is actually way more growth opportunity in this space than one may think. And so, super early on, that's what we were doing a lot of, was selling trainings. And then the evolution from there was we were doing break fix. So meaning that if something broke, we would go on site and fix it. But during this whole time period, we were acquiring data. So we were understanding how adult could be reskilled. Something that's very interesting is that there actually isn't a ton of research on adult reskilling. And there's not a ton of research today on how adults learn with new technology, right? So we know about tactile learning, but how does tactile learning play with virtual reality? Is it the same? Does it tap into the same, like, brain nerves, all of that? So we were collecting a lot of data on like adult reskilling, and then we were collecting a lot of data on what we did in the field. And so that naturally evolved us into last year, where we were able to put out a product called Reliability as a Service. And so essentially this is a fixed price performance management product. And so I can say, hey, for that asset for 5 years, this is your total price, no matter what. And it includes labor. And I utilize my data set in order to de-risk that, increase margins. And I understand the workforce. If I do have to roll a truck, who would be most successful on this device?
So are you still doing training?
So we still do training. That actual part of our company, it will actually be splitting out soon into a nonprofit, so it can fully really engage in training.
Because like Gen Alpha now is all about not going to a 4-year college, and it's about getting into the pathway of whatever to get a job. And so I see this as a career pathway too, is getting into a training, upskilling as a young person. I can see what you're saying about older too, although I don't know, getting Rick Garcia here in technology will never, ever happen.
Can I hang out with you for a month?
But I just see a path for young people in this area that you're in now too.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the reasons for us to like really move that org into its own, organization, is because we see that there's not only like a lot of opportunity in the training, but the how, right? And I think like I ended up hiring my SVP of Learning and Development, Kiana Scott, who her whole degree and background is in adult brain-based learning. Whereas a lot of times when you are going to like, not a knock, but like a actuality, when you go to like government funded training programs, it is not the same caliber that like I would go to when I was working at a Fortune 100 company and I had to learn a new skill set, right? It is two different types of ways of how people are engaging with you, how they're helping you make sure you're learning. And so we took that level of training and we're inserting into programs that don't usually see training done in such a way. And it's all really based off of that learner. And so I think, we'll see more of that in 2025. The company really split out and really invest more, not just like in EV charging technician training, but just like brain-based training for new technologies, period, specifically for folks that like a 4-year degree doesn't work for them. Last thing I said, like me specifically, like learning has always been very hard. Before I started ChargerHelp, I applied to B school like 4 times and got denied every single time, But my second year at ChargerHelp, I had kept applying to Harvard Business School, kept getting declined. But my second year at ChargerHelp, their first climate podcast, for their business school, it was me, and so I still want to eventually go to Harvard if they ever let me in. But
Are you listening, Harvard?
Are you listening, Harvard? My co-founder got a degree from there, so I'm just like, come on, man. But yeah, I think there's so much work that I'm like super excited about, like what are the different pathways to learning and how do we facilitate better learning for folks that may not have access to, all of the cool stuff that corporate companies usually do to help with learning.
It's clear that you have a great deal of knowledge. We can hear your passion in your voice. Now we want to ask you about the challenges and share with us what keeps you up at night.
Sometimes I think the greatest thing that keeps me up at night is just like holding to building a good company while going really quickly. Our company is very diverse, like and from different like educational backgrounds, racial backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds. And I think being a venture-backed company, it's easy for me to just like run through walls and just maybe not pay as much attention as I think my core would want me to pay attention. But my co-founder, her whole background is with workforce development. She worked for the Department of Labor Job Corps system. And she's the one that really like holds me to. And it's just like, look, you can go really fast, but like who will be around the table with you if you go really fast? Like if our goal was to like make sure we have this diverse team and that we do have pathways for learning at the company, like how am I continuing to hold myself accountable to that? So that really keeps me up at night, as I'm very driven and I'm very ambitious. But at my core, I do want to build a good company. And I think sometimes those things can come into tension with one another. If I want to go a lot faster than maybe the folks in the room are ready to go. And I think it's a healthy tension because I think it keeps us both sharp. But that how we build ChargerHelp is just important to how well ChargerHelp does to me.
Right. And I think, too, running a business, it's you run fast, but you want to bring everyone with you, but you want to make sure that not only building a good company, but it's protected, too. And that's what I continue to do is, you always want to make sure if you're changing into a different sector that it's not going to affect your brand or do that. And I could see where if you want to stay in your lane and you don't want to go in too many different lanes because that could affect you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What's in the 5 to 10 year plan for ChargerHelp?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a really cool transition phase right now. I feel like the company for a while has always been a little bit of two. So we've always had like workforce development and technology. And the goal was always to be like a tech company. And so this year we're doing, with the data set that we've been able to acquire over the last 5 years and a lot of the work that we're investing into our platform, there is a strong switch that's going to be full tech company. And a part of that I'm really excited about is just this reliability as a service product that if we could get to a place where we can like confidently ensure these like very complex assets and we have a unique data set that we can, really de-risk the performance of a very complex asset, I think that in and of itself can transform across multiple assets that we're going to see come into the built environment, whether those are autonomous vehicles, smart corridors. There's so much more that's coming into the built environment that will require a different level of thinking about reliability because you have so many different software players. And as most software engineers, no one thinks it's their fault when something breaks. So, could ChargerHelp, be that entity that ensures that all software in the built environment is running at its utmost performance, right? That's, to me, the next 5 years we're figuring out.
Do you have any sort of game plan in your back pocket for all the upcoming major events here in Los Angeles? Are you going to be doing more, or what does that look like for ChargerHelp?
Yeah, I mean, our goal really is to really dig in and with LA. I mean, it's so funny. Even though we're LA born, I actually have the least amount of contracts in LA. Like, oh, wow. Most of my contract base is on the East Coast. We currently, support every utility in the state of Maryland. We work with all the major utilities in the state of New York and Wisconsin. And so it's been so hard to get business in LA. And so I think, this year I'm going to be home more. And that's my goal, is just to build relationships and then to show look, we've done some incredible things, across the U.S. and we would love to be helpful in LA as we start deploying out more smart infrastructure.
LA, are you listening to that? Yeah. We need more ChargerHelp here.
No question. By the way, who uses more electricity than anybody in the country, but right here in Los Angeles and the West Coast? Do you have any advice for young people, and especially those folks in the underrepresented community?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's just to there's literally nothing you can't do. Like there's nothing you can't do. So literally, whatever your dream is, just run through walls on it, and that failure is okay. I think that sometimes people think that because you failed or that something is hard means that don't do it. No, find the side door. And if a door is locked, find the window. If the window is locked, find a friend. You know what I mean? I just think that I just wholeheartedly believe that there is nothing in my life that I can't accomplish if I want to do it. And I'm okay with doing hard things.
I am so glad. So how I met Kameale, I was at a award show technology roundtable before the award show, and everybody at the table was talking about ChargerHelp. And so I just had to introduce myself to Kameale, and I'm so glad I did, because you really are just something that more people should hear about you, your story, what you're doing, and just like what you said, for young people, just anything is possible.
Absolutely.
It's inspiring, and the passion is a big chunk of that. Wouldn't you agree? Regardless of what the thing is that you're going after, just to be excited about it and fired up and going and getting it.
Oh, yeah. Excited and just grateful. I feel like, when I started the company, I was going through a divorce. My mom died. My uncle, like I've had like a lot of tragedy, but even in that, like you connect with amazing people that invite you in that you just have no idea what can happen next. You know what I mean? And I think living in a space of like gratitude, even if life seems hard, is just so important. Because I don't know. Yeah, I think gratitude is huge to all of this. Yeah.
Anything else from you, Stephanie?
I think we leave it on gratitude.
Okay. Can I still join you for the show next time?
Well, we'll see. We'll check it out.
We'll have to listen to the tape. Kameale Terry has been our guest on The Idea People. For more information about ChargerHelp, you can go to chargerhelp.com. And for more info about us, check out leandrewsgroup.com. And we'll see you next time.
Okay, the podcast set up downtown. We got motion. What's the idea, people? The conversation's open. Leandrew's Group, the firm. Yeah, we here now. Let's talk about great ideas. Have a sit. We on a mission. You get the idea, people. Glad you pulled up. How you doing? Nice to meet you.